Good morning, class. I hope that you are doing well. And today we're going to speak about something that could be a little controversial because it has to do with labels. And labels are a very tricky subject. And so, what we're going to do is talk about the pros and cons of a label because there are pros and cons to the label. So, let's start with the pros. The pros are that one, you talk about symptoms, and because you can talk about the symptoms, you can also talk about treatment. Treatment is a great thing to kind of have a plan and an idea of what you need to do to move forward. It also can have a built in community. So, for instance, if you find that you have gotten yourself on a diagnosis of being on the spectrum for autism, then that opens up your world to understanding a little bit more about yourself. It could also help you to acknowledge things within yourself and feel that you're not alone. It can connect you into a community of other people that are like you, and also give you that support network. And so connecting you to a community, correct? So there are definite pros to that. But what we've seen in the healing industry is that people will often become their identity of their illness or their diagnosis or their label in essence. So they label themselves with whatever that diagnosis is, and then they become that illness or that diagnosis. And so this is where it gets a little controversial. Chances are some of you will even have a reaction to what I'm saying, even right now. As little as I've already said, you may already be having a reaction to what I'm saying, and this is part of what I'm talking about. So, in this section, it isn't about denying your diagnosis, it isn't about denying treatment, it isn't about denying that you were labeled with this diagnosis. What this is really about is becoming more than your diagnosis and not getting stuck in identifying yourself as the illness. Because as a healer and as someone who wishes to be healed, you can determine what you do next once you are given a label or a diagnosis. Okay, so the sun has come through. We live in Washington, and so we are getting a burst of sunshine, so we are grateful for that. I'm going to continue to keep recording regardless that the light will change. Okay, so let's talk more about that. So I want to make sure I covered it all. With, the pros, we identify a need. We could identify services. So we could identify services available to you because you have this label now. You have a built-in community or a support group. And so these are some of the pros of that, okay? So let's talk more about the cons of it. You can, and a person does sometimes, I've seen this in my own family, a person might initially be elated that they have received a diagnosis because it helps them to understand themselves. Ultimately, however, later on down the line, when the elation of all of the turmoil of not understanding what was going on and then being labeled with something inevitably will lead the person back to the fact that they were labeled with something. And usually people have a response to that is not good. And here's why: because people see a label as a permanent problem. This makes a person feel less powerful. Okay, and when we feel less powerful, we feel less than. This kind of kicks off the feeling of worthlessness that often people feel. Now, you don't need to have a diagnosis or a label to feel worthless, because we have a lot of people that feel that way for varying different reasons. And this is why we seek out healing in the first place, correct? But seeing this firsthand through my clients and also in my personal family, dealing with diagnoses of different things, inevitably it leads you back to a sadness, sometimes a rage. that you have something that's been diagnosed, and it is going to be a part of your life, and that you cannot deny. So you should never deny the thing that has helped you to see where you can receive treatment in something. However, you don't need to over identify with your illness where you become that person who is less than, you become that person who is only your diagnosis. You do not need to become the person that is now unable to move forward or do other things because you've been labeled with this diagnosis, whatever that may be. This is sometimes where the victim psyche kicks in, that I'm broken. A lot of people come into therapy with that mindset that because they have problems, they're broken. And because you have problems, you are not broken. You are human. So I'm trying to get this. I'm going to lean in because there's this shadow that's going across my face. Okay, so another thing is it could lock you into being in need of something so that you can fix yourself. It locks you into an identification. You become your illness and nothing else. Association with being broken leads to a victim psyche that leads to depression and feeling you have no empowerment. Okay, this is a huge one, and this is why I deal with this in my practice. I deal with this in my practice because you do have power. You do have power. Just because you are labeled with something does not mean that you do not own your power anymore, or that you, while someone else is treating you for something, whether it's an acute medical problem or whether it's, a diagnosis like depression, you still have the ability to begin healing yourself. And the way I like to look at it is, all forms of healing are integrative, right? There's the medical Western medicine that's going to treat the body, and they have medicines and drugs and things that are necessary to heal, including vaccines and things of that nature. And then there is the other aspect of you not needing to sit around waiting for somebody to tell you when you can heal or how you can heal. So you let the doctors treat the body and you do the treatments, but you then also work on the mind and how you're thinking about the treatment and how you're actually beginning to empower yourself to treat yourself. That could be as simple as getting regular massages. It could be going to see a healer for Reiki or chakra work, or any number of alternative healing methods can be implemented as part of this process. But talking and counseling and cognitive behavioral therapy is a huge part of the alternative healing method, because it's not enough to just do for another person. They also need to understand that they can do for themselves. And this is why just settling for an identity of an illness is not a good thing. Where we can acknowledge that we have an illness or acknowledge that there is a diagnosis, whatever that diagnosis is, but then empower ourselves to complement what the doctor's advice or the doctor's treatment is, and work on it within ourselves, and see that we are powerful enough to move into healing on our own. Does that make sense? Now, the way that you look at things is going to determine whether or not you're going to spiral downward or you're going to spiral upward, okay? And even with an illness, a label, a diagnosis, you don't have to have a downward spiral. True, we have to acknowledge that we are going to have feelings about it, and we will feel, many times we'll feel sad or a depression or anger or rage. And if we feel that way, or if our client feels that way, we don't need to deny it and try and overcome it. Feel what you feel because you've come by that feeling honestly. Let yourself experience whatever that feeling is, but then move forward. Okay? A person, try not to be in a spot, I don't like to use the word try, but do your best to not stay in that spot more than 48 hours, okay? If you need to feel anger and rage or sadness about something, then allow yourself to feel, because your feeling is your divinity, right? It's telling you what's going on with you. Owning your empowerment, however, means that you pick yourself back up and you say, okay, let's get to work. What do I need to do to change this? What can I do? If it can't be changed, if it's something that's just, it is now. And I can't off the top of my head think about what that is, because I do feel like everything can be changed and adjusted and modified. But depending on how you think about things, then you get up and you become part of the solution, not the label, but part of the solution. Okay, I have this. Okay, this is what's going on. How can I be part of the solution? You start to ask yourself questions about how you can solve this issue, or how you can complement treatment, or how you will now make adjustments in your life so that you can live empowered with this label of what you've been given. So can you see how that is very different than taking a label, taking a diagnosis, and then just sitting with it and feeling broken, unempowered, and then that creates this downward spiral into nothing good. Okay. If you wake up after your anger, rage, sadness, depression, and 48 hours later you get up and you say, okay, this is what is, and what can I do to be part of the solution? How can I live my best life with this thing? What do I have to do? What do I have to implement? So if this is you, then you figure that out. If you have a client that's coming to you in counseling and alternative healing methods, and they are experiencing things like this is where you, if they have come to you for healing body work, energy work, any of that, massage, but they've spoken to you about that, that's where you can transition them into a counseling session, a spiritual counseling session, where you can help guide them by using cognitive behavioral therapy techniques that I'm giving you here, Gestalt psychotherapy, which is just really about bringing them into the now of what's going on, and then having them experience what they're going through, and then creating experiences that are going to move them through it, right? So how are they going to take action? I think that cognitive behavioral therapy and Gestalt really go hand in hand, because it's about experiencing the changes, feeling what you feel, living in the now, and then taking it one session at a time. And whatever the client is talking about at that time, that's what you deal with, and then help them with methods of how to move it forward. My experience is they don't always know. I do have a agreement between both of us at the time of entering into therapy that I don't know is not an answer. And so when someone inevitably says, I don't know, I say, okay, so we'll work through this together, but we need to agree that I don't know is not an answer. Oftentimes it's not because they don't know, it's because they just are not used to being in the solution orientation. They've already defaulted into the negativeness of it. Sometimes it's a diversion method of not dealing with the problem. In most cases, it's that. And so when you hold your client accountable and tell them that I don't know is not an option, and that you are not there to give them every solution, they have to actually participate in this. Now, a lot of times they aren't going to know what to do. They're just frazzled. They're at the end of their rope and they don't know. So you begin to ask them questions about things. What do you think is something that you could do in your daily life to kind of get yourself out of just the label, but moving towards empowerment? What is something in your daily life? And it could be, if they still don't know and you don't know because you're not in their life, you could ask them what it is that they're challenged with, like what happens to them a lot naturally, what goes on in their mind, what kind of things do they say to themselves when they hit that area of their life where they're starting to spiral down. Once you find out and they tell you what that is, it's something that occurs in their life that causes that downward spiral because of their label. Then you can use that instance and go, okay, so what would be the opposite of whatever you're telling yourself at that moment? And that's what you put your building blocks on. You take the reality of their day, what they struggle with, and then you think of what the opposite response to that is. That's going to be the better response, right? The good response versus the negative response. And then you ask them, so what can you do to implement techniques that are going to get you to that positive thinking. What mantra do you need to say? What process can you put? This is the time where, when you want to stop a old process of dealing with something, you implement it with a new one. And you also interrupt the normal default process by using the Emotional Audit 16 form. You have them print up tons of copies, keep it in your purse, keep it in your pocket, keep it on a clipboard, in your house, so that when you are starting to experience these emotions, you stop the process by going directly to that EA 16 form and you start to fill it out. This form allows people to interrupt the process so that they can start really thinking about what it is that's really happening versus just spiraling downward uncontrollably. Okay, so you don't have to become your label. And so I hope that by listening to this, you have understood that, a label can be a blessing and a curse. It could yo-yo between the two all the time. It can help you, give you a community, help you find treatment, but it could also lead to depression and feelings that you're broken, that you're less than, you're not worthy, all of which are not true. And so whether we're dealing with this within ourselves or we're helping clients move out of that, you have to, at a certain point, decide, okay, I acknowledge the label, but I am moving towards empowerment. I am going to aid getting better. I'm going to, adjust around whatever it is that I have to deal with, but I'm going to start being part of the solution. What do I need to do to create a healthy life despite the label? And you have to just decide that that's what you're going to do. With clients, you will have to give them ideas of how to do that. You might coach them on mantras. You might coach them on the EA 16 form. And then every week when they come back, talk about it. You may rotate healings in between spiritual counseling and Reiki, spiritual counseling and chakra work, spiritual counseling and massage. The most important thing is that it needs both. Because to just do for a client and have them lay down and not understand the emotional makeup and the voices and the internal things that are going on with them, in my practice, it's not enough to cure the problem, because mind always factors into everything in healing, right? So if you believe you can heal, then you will aid the process of healing. If you believe that you are powerless to heal, your body's going to do its part, but it may take a lot longer, or it may not work because your negativity is counteracting anything that the drugs are doing, right? So mind enters into everything, and we know this. It's been studied, in hospitals, in psychology class. I remember reading about that, and those of you who have taken psychology courses probably have heard the same things, that they have studied people. You have two people in the same room with the same disease. One is extremely negative about it, hates everybody, is in a rage, doesn't want to cooperate with treatment, all these negative things, versus somebody who is optimistic, who takes it in stride, who wants to get better, who talks about getting better, has things to look forward to in life, has people, family, that are supporting. Though that person gets better and the negative person would die. And they tested this over and over again, because that's what science is about, right? It's a controlled study where they test it over and over, and they get the same response over and over again, and every time it's the same. So mind does factor into everything that we do, and so it is important to address what's going on in the mind and giving our client or ourselves techniques that we can use to overcome what we're going through. So if you are going through this, you have to work within yourself. You don't have to heal yourself completely of this to be an effective counselor. In fact, to counsel other people as you are implementing these things, I think even makes you stronger, because you've been through it. So you have the compassion, and you also have the experience to share with them, saying, look, I've been through this myself. I understand how the mind works when you're dealing with these things, and this is what worked for me. And a person will connect with you on that level because you have been through it. So I think that people that have really struggled with things like this, they are even to me, the best teachers, because They have practical experience, and they also don't even just have the book knowledge, they have personal experience, and they have compassion and empathy. Now, you don't have to have gone through this to have the compassion and empathy. Chances are, because you're even here listening to this, that's how you roll. So anyway, I want you to consider that. I want you to think about what labels, if any, you've been given, and start being part of the solution. Let the doctors help you in your diagnosis and treatment, and you also support that diagnosis, treatment, label, whatever it is, and you work towards being the solution that aids in that healing, or just in the maintenance. If it's something that's ongoing that isn't going to go away, that you are part of the solution of how to maintain it while living your highest quality of life. And that is available to everyone. I don't care what your label is or what your story is. If you believe in here that you can still have a high quality life despite what your label is, then you shall have it. So I hope you've enjoyed this class on labels. Leave comments, questions, if you have any for me. I'm always available to talk to you about that. If you've had any reactions to anything that I'm saying, that's a cause for you to look a little bit deeper on your own belief systems, and see if there's anything in there that is not empowering. And if there's something in there that is not empowering to yourself, do your best to rewrite that. Sit down and write out what it is that you're having issues with and why. Figure out yourself, analyze yourself and why you think that way. And is that something that you learned? Is it something that you just had sad feelings about and it just became what you believe? Really test your own beliefs here by writing them out, seeing what they are, and then asking yourself, do I still feel that way today? A lot of times we have belief systems based on how we may have felt in the past. Maybe when we were young and we didn't have, this sophisticated critical thinking that we have now. It could have been, a week ago. We change all the time, we evolve, and there's nothing wrong with that. So if you believed something a week ago, you can change your mind, and that's your right to do that. So always be willing to change your mind if it's in your best interest for healing and high quality living. Okay? I look forward to seeing you in the next class, and see you then.